Roll call, please.
Mr. Hollister?
Here.
Mr. Olsemer?
Here.
Mr. Gershi?
Here.
Mrs. Fiorella? Here. Mr. Cadenzi?
Present.
Mr. Lindau?
Here.
Mr. McDonough?
Here.
Mrs. Bliss? Here. Mr. Kudnine?
He's excused.
Dr. LeCoe?
Here.
Mr. Sheehan?
Here.
Miss Emmett is here. Dr. Barrett?
Here.
Mrs. Donahue?
She's excused.
Miss Feliski? Here. Mrs. Miller?
She's excused.
Mr. Gregorski?
Here.
Mrs. Olsemer? Here. Mrs. Corelli?
She's excused.
Mrs. LaRosa? Here. Mrs. Gregory?
She's excused.
Mrs. Liptak?
And she's excused.
Mr. Hollister, you have 8 board members present.
Thank you. At this time, we do have a couple business items we'd like to take care of, and we'll do that prior to the task of reviewing the budget. So if anyone would care to make a motion on item number 5 on your agenda?
Do you want to take these individually or all together?
I'll leave that up to you. I have no reason not to take them together. That's either way.
I recommend that the Board of Education accept the following resignation. Dr. LeCoe, effective June the 30th, 2015.
I'll second it.
The motion has been made and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? I will add with regrets, Dr. LeCoe has certainly served this district well in his years here, and he will be a great loss to the district. I will add with regrets to that.
Thank you,
Echo that as well.
Thank you.
I would repeat that.
Thanks.
What he's done here has been astonishing in the curriculum and so forth.
Thank you.
I think it's very unfortunate for the district, for our students, that he is leaving. I guess I could understand why, as he prefers to do or is thinking about doing something else in the educational field. But we will definitely miss him. We'll miss his academic knowledge, and he's done a lot of things for this district to put us on the map.
Thank you. Any others? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Any abstaining? The ayes have it by a vote of 7 yes and 1 no by Mr. Lindo. Do we have a motion on the items 5B?
I recommend that the Board of Education accept the following resignation for Tanya Corelli, effective June the 30th, 2015, with regrets also.
I'll second the motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstaining? The ayes have it unanimously. Do we have a motion on item 5C, please?
I recommend that the Board of Education accept the following resignation of Joseph Sauter, effective April the 24th, 2015.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstaining? The ayes have it unanimously.
Who seconded that?
Pardon?
Mr. Olsemer?
Who seconded?
Those items having been covered, I believe at this time, we have item 6 on the back of the page. Sorry, do we have a motion on item 6?
I recommend that the Board of Education accept the following resignations for retirement purposes. Robert Haney, effective May 1st, 2015. Gene Nepzadowski, effective June 30th, 2015, and Joan Robobilski, effective June 30th, 2015.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Any abstaining? The ayes have it unanimously. Now, having covered those business items, we, at this time, will have a presentation of the narrative budget for the 2015-2016 school year. Ms. Emmett, it's all yours. Thank you.
Down, is that okay?
Yep.
That means see the screen's a little better. All right, this is a presentation that we do each year for the budget preview for 15-16 school year. We'll go over the sources of revenue and then expenditures by major areas. I'll touch on the highlights of the different areas under expenditures and then summarize everything towards the end. Just a note that this is a still working document. You know, each day we're still getting updated numbers, changes. So this is the budget as of today, as of yesterday, but you know, it still could change again before we get through our tentative motion that will be on our May meeting and then our final budget, which we will pass in June. So just keep that in mind. Revenues, broke out revenues, just so you can see where the sources of revenues come from. 64.13% of our revenues come from local sources sources being property taxes and real estate transfer tax, things like that. Also, several grants that come through the federal government come through under local sources because we get them through our intermediate unit. So they're considered local sources because they're passed through. 34.18% come from our state funding, and that's our basic ed subsidy, our special ed subsidy, any type of state grants we get. Their share of our Social Security, Medicare, and their share of PSERS. That all falls under the state funding. And then 1.49% comes from federal sources. Federal sources for us are our title programs, our federal Title I program. We have some money under Title II, which helps us with some of our classes, and also any type of medical access money that we receive. Those are our federal sources of money. This budget that we're going to look at tonight consists of these dollar amounts. There's $25,700,000 of local funds, $13,800,000 of state funds, and just under $600,000 of federal funds. That's working on the same line. County assessments. Full market value for all the properties in West Wayne School District is $1,800,000,000, and that's as of the State Tax Equalization Board for 2013, those current numbers that we get from the State Tax Equalization Board. The assessed value, which comes from the county, and that's through the end of 2014, is $1,596,000,000 of assessed value. A collectible mill for us, so each mill that we impose under property tax would generate $1,566,000. Changes for local revenue. With changes in, just general changes in assessments from the county, like increased property values, different things like that, generated $107,511 in new property tax money for us for this year. And then these are just a reminder, I don't have these in when I'm doing the presentation and the dollar amounts that I gave you for revenue. I don't have these next three numbers in, but these are just things that we've talked about, what we've gone through in our January and our February budgets. The increase in millage, the index would generate $449,000. If we took the referendum exception for retirement purposes, it's $300,000. And then the referendum exception for special ed would generate $540,000. Our state revenues. We talked about this at our last budget meeting that we had. I gave a brief update of the proposals that are on the board right now from Governor Wolf. And also there's been a lot of talk between that side and the legislative side as far as not really knowing what we're going to get for state funding this year. So at this point, we are estimating that we will receive the same amount of money that we got in 14-15, but we're not including any of the increases until we know more from the state, because at this point, you know, it's not something that we can guarantee or count on for our budget. So we're moving forward at this point of our budget process saying, we're comfortable to say we're gonna get what we got in 14-15, not comfortable enough to say we're gonna get additional funding that we had talked about.
Rose, just on that point, we're hearing that the state may not have a budget July 1st during the Rendell administration, which makes it impossible for Mrs. Emmett and this board to make a really good decision based on factual numbers. We might not even have them, but that's the problem here for Rose.
Yeah. Word that we're hearing now is it might be August before that they have a budget in place. I mean, that's kind of just talk, we haven't gotten anything in writing on that, but that's just talk that we've heard. It'll be August before they finalize their budget. So, but we still have to have a budget by the end of June. So we're going to move forward with these assumptions at this point, unless we get better indication prior to our final vote in June. The Ready to Learn grant, that was a new grant that came out in 14-15. It replaced our old accountability block grant, and we received $192,000 for that. There's been talk that that money will roll into our basic ed funding under Governor Wolf's proposal, but even if it doesn't, I still feel comfortable that that money would still come in as a revenue source for us. We've gotten that either under accountability block grant or under Ready to Learn since like 2008-9, I think was the first year that we got that funding. So I do believe we would still see that funding coming through. So we did leave that in the budget. Federal revenue, final allocations are not in the federal revenue yet, but we do anticipate being level funded as far as our title programs for 15-16. The only changes I did make is under the Medicare, the access money, I did reduce our revenue sources for that, just based on what we've seen over the last 2 years with the vendors that the state is using to process all the claims. Things are held up, things have changed, and we were seeing a reduced dollar amount from that, so I did reduce those figures. Our fund balance, at this point, don't feel it's at a level where we would recommend using much of it to balance our 15-16 budget. Hopefully, we will end the 14-15 school year with about $1.8 million in fund balance. And that's keeping the balance that we ended 13-14 with, which was $840,000, plus the money that we did receive in back pay from the state for the PlanCon, all the payments that we had made over the years for our evergreen construction. We did receive the back pay on that, so that will help our fund balance to at least start to build up. At the $1.8 million, that's about 4.5% of our budget. That's what our fund balance is at.
Rose, quick question on that.
Sure.
Are we gonna see another payout like we did last June? Are you expecting?
No, what they did, they paid us all the back pay, all the way back to 2006, our first payment that we made. We did receive all the back pay, and then now, every time I make a payment, I can submit for the reimbursement, so it should come on a regular basis now. Like, I just made a bond payment on April 1st, and I submitted the paperwork after I made the payment, and I've already got notice that at the last day of April, I will get my state subsidy on that. So within the month, I'm now getting it, so it wouldn't be a more big lump payouts, but just as I make payments, we make payments twice a year, and as I make those payments, we'll see the reimbursement come in.
What would that sum be that we're gonna receive?
It's 30%, it's a formula, but it's all factored in. I do have that factored in, the formula for the amount we would receive each year. It's about $500,000 based on the amount of our payments. It's rough, that's a rough estimate, because I know that's about what I'm getting in for this April payment. Okay?
Rose?
Yeah.
You said the fund balance at 1.8 would be about 4.5%.
Correct.
What's recommended?
The state usually recommends, or they say we can have, based on our budget level of 40 million, about 8%. So 8% of the 40 million. So really about half of where we could be. We could be closer to $3 million in fund balance. On the expenditure side, we just broke out how we spend our budget each year. 58.2% of our budget is spent on instruction. Instruction is classroom expenses, and that includes salaries, benefits, supplies, everything that would go into running the actual classrooms of the district. 31% is spent on support services. Support services is all non-classroom activities, but still related to the education. It is our libraries, our nurses, our administration, a psychologist, things like that, our guidance department, that's all under support services. Student and community services is 1.8%, and that's all of our sports and all of our extracurricular activities for our students. And then the 8.9% is our debt service, that covers the bond payments that we have scheduled to be paid during each school year. And this again is just another way of breaking out our expenses. If you look across the entire budget and you look at the way we spent, 39% is spent on salaries, just under 27% is spent on benefits, and then you go down the line where 8.9% is our debt service. Just highlighting some of the different areas under expenses where we're seeing changes. Right now, as of this meeting that we just held tonight, we have 2 retirees under our certified staff that will be retiring this year. And a replacement for a retiring teacher would cost $79,000. That $79,000 includes their base step 1 salary, plus all the benefits that go along with it. And under benefits, I mean, not just healthcare. It would be healthcare, Social Security, Medicare, the retirement, unemployment comp, and workers' comp. All of that included would cost the $79,000 to add a teacher, to replace those teachers. And I know that right now that the teachers that are retiring are still under
Healthcare.
healthcare.
Well, the teachers that are retiring are under healthcare yet, correct? They'll be until a certain age, right?
Under the contract that expired,
Right,
yes.
under the
Yeah,
contract
that's still
that-
to be negotiated going
Okay,
forward.
Okay.
Under support staff. Excuse me, sorry. We have 4 support staff retirements. There was 2 from the secretarial staff, 1 from custodial, and 1 from our teachers' aid staff for retirements, and then the 1 support staff resignation that came out of our technology department. One of the secretarial staff was actually from my department here, and she's retiring this month, and we have made the decision we are not replacing that position. So that is one position that we are not replacing for next year. She's not in the budget that we're talking about for 15-16. The other positions, they're kind of just came about as far as resignation, so we are still working on that and looking at that to see where we can make changes if we can, or if we need to replace those. So at this point, I do have the rest of those in the budget for replacement for next year. Existing staff. Again, there's not a lot that we can talk about right now. Both of the contracts, the professional contract and the custodial maintenance contract, are still currently being negotiated. So there's no changes in that right now. Clerical and the administration have not been voted on for salaries for next year, so they're under review at this point. Under benefits, healthcare, a big change that we had from the numbers that I used to do our budget for January and February to now, the one I'm proposing tonight, is our health insurance. I started out in the January, February with assuming that we would have a 10% increase in our PPO rate. We ended up having only 3.7% increase, which is it was a lot of savings. It took out a lot out of our expense, out of our budget for tonight. The traditional rates did go up 50%, but we do only have a small number of staff that are still under the traditional rates. So it didn't affect us a large amount, but we did see a savings under the PPO side. The retirement rate, our PSERS rate went from 21.4 for this current year, and it's going up to 25.84 for next year. So that's a 21% increase in our PSERS rate. And that was equated to about $600,000 in additional expenses for existing staff.
That's another area where Governor Wolf has other ideas, along with some of the Republican Party in the House and the Senate, and hopefully that'll change. I don't know what you're hearing on it, Rose.
Yeah, and not a lot of detail.
Yeah.
The words PSERS and the retirement has been mentioned, but as far as any specific plans or what they want to do, I have not heard anything.
They know something needs to be done real soon, or else we're all going to be broke.
Right. A workers' compensation, I don't have final numbers on that for next year, but I don't expect it to be much different than our current year. We haven't had a large amount of changes in claims or anything like that, so I think we should stay pretty level for where we're at with 14-15. Under charter schools, these are other services, the biggest change there is charter schools, and it really has nothing to do with the actual program. We still have about 88 students that are enrolled in the charter schools outside of our district, and that includes cyber schools and our brick and mortar charter schools that are local here in our area. And I increased the budget to $1,125,000 just because I had under budgeted this year. 14-15, I under budgeted what we actually needed for the cost for those programs. I only had about 900,000 out there prior to tonight, or
Rose,
prior to this year.
how about numbers of students?
Number of students have been about level, probably for the last 3 years. We haven't seen a big increase. Up to that point, each year we were adding, some years 10 students. You know, I remember probably about 7 years ago, we were at about 40 students in cyber, and we've doubled it in the last 4 years, the number of students. But we really kind of leveled off on that. And I think the in-house programs that we started to offer with our VLN has helped us as far as, you know, having another alternative for the students that's not an outside cyber school, because the outside cyber school is an expensive option for us. Transportation services, we use contracted services for all our transportation, and we pay at the state formula. This year, the state formula, the cost index for that formula has increased 0.8% over the 14-15 rate, so that'll increase. But what the expense to the district really won't change much. We pay, it's $500,000 of our market value, which equates to about $900,000 paid out. As long as we pay at our contractors at state formula, then the rest of the money comes back in subsidy from the state. So we do continue to pay at state formula, and so we should continue to see the state subsidy, anything above that $900,000 that we pay out.
There's about a 1-year lag time on that reimbursement, is that right?
There is, yeah.
So
So
if
like
we
for-
spend $3 million this year, we would get most of it back next year.
Right,
Okay.
right. So as long as you don't have a huge change in your transportation, you pretty much see level funding each year. Like if we added, 5 buses for some reason, we added a new run, and then we would actually have to pay more out in the 1 year,
Right.
and it would be a subsequent year that we would get the subsidy back. But as long as our expenses are roughly the same, we do see the subsidy coming in pretty level each year. Extracurricular student activities. At this point, we're just asking everyone to maintain the cuts that we put in place in 14-15. And last year, when we were making our big cuts, we cut over 20% of all of our extracurricular activities, our classroom instructional supplies. And this year, we're asking everybody to maintain those cuts, to continue to have decreased expenses and just, watch as closely as we can for our expenses. The same with our instructional, maintain the cuts. Under building and grounds, fuel oil changes. This rate just came in yesterday afternoon. We just got our fuel oil bids back from the IU. And our rate is going to go to $2.2059 for 15-16. And at 14-15, we're at $3.07, so $1 a gallon less. So that's going to save. I don't have that figured into this budget yet, because I just got this yesterday afternoon. I didn't get a chance to work it in. But it'll be about $100,000 of additional savings that we'll see on our expense side. And I'll factor that in for when we do the tentative budget for May. I'll have that in there. I don't have it in the numbers for tonight. Our debt service, like we mentioned before, we are current with the state reimbursement for our Evergreen project. The Board of Ed also signed at our last meeting on April 13th, they signed a parameters resolution for potential refunding of our current series. We have three bond series out there right now, 2010A, 2010B, and 2010 AA. They're out there